I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see your name on the list, but I'm supposed to be here. This is my son's wedding. I'm so sorry, but your name has been marked off. There must be some mistake. I was invited. I understand, ma'am, but I cannot let you in. I needed to do what was best for my family. Your family? What about me? Mom, I said I'm sorry. Don't go, Evelyn. Evelyn, is that really you?
The woman at the entrance checked the guest list twice before looking up at me. I'm sorry, ma'am. Wilma Langford isn't on the final list. For a moment, I thought there had been a mistake. Then I saw the note beside the updated names revised at the bride's request. My own daughter had removed me. Across the ballroom, Madeline saw me standing there with her grandmother's wedding handkerchief in my hands. She didn't move. She didn't say a word. I turned toward the door before anyone could see how badly that silence hurt. Then a woman behind me gasped, "Wilma Langford, is that really you?" I turned around. The owner of Whitmore Estate was staring at me like she had just seen a ghost. If your own child had done this to you, would you stay or walk away? Tell me what you would have done in the comments. And if stories about family dignity and second chances mean something to you, please like and subscribe. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. 6 weeks earlier, I still believed my biggest problem with Madeline's wedding would be finding comfortable shoes. At 67, I had learned not to borrow trouble before it arrived. My husband Robert used to say I could worry a hole through a brick wall if I stared at it long enough. He had been gone 4 years by then, but sometimes I still heard his voice when the house became too quiet. We had lived in the same modest brick house outside Richmond, Virginia, for 31 years. It wasn't impressive. The kitchen cabinets had been refinished twice. The back porch leaned slightly toward the garden, and one stubborn floorboard in the hallway squeaked, no matter how many times Robert tried to fix it. But it was ours. It was where we raised our only daughter. Madeline had once loved that house without apology. As a little girl, she would sit on the kitchen counter while I cooked Sunday dinner, swinging her legs and stealing pieces of cornbread when she thought I wasn't looking. When she was 13 and had her heart broken for the first time, she crawled into my bed at midnight and cried against my shoulder. When she left for college, she called me almost every evening during her first month. Somewhere along the way, those calls became weekly, then occasional. I told myself that was what happened when children built lives of their own. And when Madeline called Tuesday afternoon and said, "Mom, we found the venue," the happiness in her voice made me forget every small distance that had grown between us. I was standing at my kitchen sink rinsing a coffee cup. "You did, yes." Finally. I smiled. Madeline and Nathan had been searching for nearly 2 months. Every place had been wrong for one reason or another. Too small, too modern, too far from Richmond, not enough parking, bad photographs, wrong atmosphere. Nathan, from what I understood, would have happily married her in somebody's backyard. Madeline wanted something memorable. "So where is it?" I asked. She paused dramatically. "Whitmore Estate." The cup nearly slipped from my hand. I caught it against the edge of the sink. For several seconds, I said nothing. "Mom." I looked through the kitchen window toward the maple tree Robert had planted the year Madeline was born. "What did you say, Whitmore Estate?" "Out past Goochland." "You know it." I knew it. I knew the long driveway before it had been paved. I knew the west ballroom before it was a ballroom. I knew where rain used to come through the roof in the old carriage house. And I remembered a much younger woman standing beside me one November evening, crying because she believed the bank was going to take everything away. But those memories belonged to another lifetime. "Mom." "Yes," I said quietly. "I know the place." Madeline laughed. "I knew you'd heard of it. Everybody has. Diane says it's one of the most respected wedding venues in Virginia." That made me smile for reasons Madeline couldn't have understood. "Does she?" "She absolutely loves it. Nathan loves it too. You should see the gardens. And the main ballroom is gorgeous." "I imagine it is." There was another pause. "You sound strange." "I'm fine, sweetheart. You're not thinking about the price, are you?" "Price, are you?" That caught me off guard. "No." Because Nathan and I have it handled. His parents are contributing and we're covering the rest. I don't want you worrying about money. There was something almost defensive in her voice. I wasn't worrying about money. Oh, okay. I dried my hands on a dish towel. How did you choose Whitmore? Madeline immediately became animated again. She told me about the chandeliers, the stone terrace, the gardens, the bridal suite, and the photographs she had already imagined taking beneath an enormous oak tree. I listened. With every detail, the Whitmore estate she described seemed farther away from the place I remembered. Not worse, just transformed. Apparently, the old carriage house had become a cocktail pavilion. The field where delivery trucks once got stuck after heavy rain was now landscaped gardens. The little office where I had spent countless nights working through invoices was part of a luxury bridal suite. 34 years could change a place. Apparently, they could change people too. I want everything to be perfect, Madeline said. You know it doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. I know, Mom. Her answer came too quickly. I smiled to myself. Does Nathan know that? She laughed. He keeps saying the same thing. I always liked that man. You've met him plenty of times. And I liked him every time. That made her laugh again, and for a moment she sounded like my little girl. After we hung up, I remained by the kitchen window. Whitmore Estate. I hadn't spoken that name aloud in years. There were photographs somewhere in my attic from those early days, tucked inside a cardboard box with old event programs and business cards. Robert had wanted me to keep them. You'll want these someday, he had told me. I had disagreed. My career had never seemed extraordinary to me. I organized events. I solved problems. I found florists when florists canceled, calmed brides when cakes collapsed, moved outdoor ceremonies inside, when thunderstorms rolled across Virginia without warning. It was work. Work I had loved, but still work. And Whitmore had been part of it. A significant part. I considered telling Madeline. For perhaps 10 seconds I imagined calling her back. You know, sweetheart, there's something funny about that place. But I stopped myself. This was her wedding. Her beginning. I didn't want to become one of those mothers who turned every milestone in their child's life into an opportunity to tell stories about themselves. Besides, if Judith Whitmore still owned the estate, there was no reason to assume she would even remember me. 34 years was a long time. People moved on. Businesses changed hands. Memories faded. So I left the past where it was. Over the next week, Madeline sent me photographs constantly. Flowers, table settings, invitation samples, bridesmaid colors. She sent me a photograph of the main entrance one evening. I enlarged it on my phone. The old brick had been restored. White columns framed the entrance now, and elegant lanterns lined the steps. I stared longer than I meant to. Robert and I had once stood on those same steps eating sandwiches from a paper bag because we had been too busy to stop for dinner. I could see him in my memory, younger and stronger, laughing because mustard had fallen on my blouse. My throat tightened. Then another message from Madeline appeared. Isn't it gorgeous? I typed back. It really is. 3 dots appeared. Then Diane says everyone is going to be impressed. I looked at those words. Everyone is going to be impressed. Something about them bothered me, though I couldn't have explained why. Maybe because Madeline had once cared more about whether people were comfortable than whether they were impressed. Maybe because lately Diane Caldwell's approval appeared in almost every wedding conversation. Diane thinks. Diane suggested. Diane knows. I reminded myself that Madeline was entering another family. Of course she wanted her future mother-in-law to approve. There was nothing sinister about that. Not yet. A few days later, Madeline came to my house carrying a thick wedding planning binder. She spread fabric samples and photographs across the same kitchen table where she had once done her algebra homework. When she showed me the seating possibilities, I noticed how carefully she described Nathan's family. Executives, attorneys, business owners, people. Diane had known for years. You've got quite a crowd coming, I said. Madeline looked up. It's going to be a very important night. I smiled. It's your wedding. Of course it is. She hesitated. That's not exactly what I meant. Before I could ask what she did mean, her phone rang. She stepped into the hallway to answer it. I remained at the table surrounded by photographs of Whitmore Estate. One photograph showed the restored west side of the property. I touched the edge of it with my fingertip. If Madeline had known what those walls meant to me, perhaps everything that followed would have happened differently. Or perhaps not. That is one of the questions I still ask myself. Because 6 weeks later, I would stand inside that beautiful estate with my name missing from my own daughter's guest list. And the woman who owned the place would remember exactly who I was, even when my daughter seemed to have forgotten. The first time Madeline corrected the way I dressed, I laughed. That was my mistake. It happened about 5 weeks before the wedding. She came by my house on a Saturday morning carrying 2 garment bags, 3 magazines, and enough nervous energy to power every light in Richmond. I had just made coffee. "Before you say anything," she announced, dropping everything across my kitchen chairs, "I'm not trying to change you." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds exactly like what somebody says before trying to change you." She laughed. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then she looked at the brown leather purse sitting beside my chair. "Mom, are you planning to carry that to the wedding?" I looked at it. Robert had given me that purse for our 35th anniversary. The leather had softened with age and one corner showed a little wear, but I kept it polished. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing." Madeline said it too quickly. "It's a perfectly good purse." But she sighed. "There is no but." I waited. Madeline lasted perhaps 4 seconds. "It just looks a little dated." I smiled. "So do I." "Mom, what, I'm 67. I'm allowed to look 67. That isn't what I mean." She pulled out her phone and showed me photographs of small evening bags. One cost nearly $600. I nearly spilled my coffee. "For that price, does it drive me to the wedding?" Madeline rolled her eyes. "You don't have to buy this exact one." "Good, because for $600 I expect a purse to cook breakfast." She laughed again, but there was tension beneath it. That was the part I noticed. Not the suggestion. The anxiety. I had raised Madeline. I knew the difference between her being particular and her being afraid. "What's going on?" I asked. "Nothing." "You've said nothing twice in 10 minutes. She sat across from me. "I just want everything to look cohesive." "Cohesive for the photographs. Sweetheart, I promise not to wrestle the bridesmaids for attention. That's not what I'm saying." I reached across the table. "Then tell me what you are saying." She looked down at her phone. "Diane has helped us get a really good photographer. His work has been featured in several magazines. There are going to be a lot of important people there." There it was again. Important people. I remembered her using almost the same phrase when we discussed the guest list. "And you're afraid my purse will offend them. Please don't make this into something." I studied her face. Madeline had always been beautiful to me, even during the years she cut her own bangs and blamed the dog. At 39, she had the polished confidence of someone who had worked hard to build a career. But lately, around the wedding, that confidence seemed to disappear whenever Diane Caldwell entered the conversation. "I'm not making it into anything I said. I'm trying to understand." Madeline stood. "Forget the purse." And just like that, the conversation ended. At least I thought it had. A week later, Diane invited us to brunch at a private dining room in a hotel in downtown Richmond. Nathan was working, so it was mostly women from both sides of the wedding. Diane arrived in a cream-colored suit and greeted everyone like a woman accustomed to being remembered. She wasn't cruel. That matters. Looking back, I could easily turn Diane into the villain because it would make everything simpler. But families rarely break because of one obvious villain. Sometimes they break because one person is insecure, another person is careless, and everyone else stays quiet too long. Diane hugged me. "Wilma, how lovely to see you. You too." She complimented my earrings. I thanked her. They had cost $28 at a little shop in Charlottesville 15 years earlier. I decided not to mention that. During brunch, I mostly listened. The women discussed wedding flowers, honeymoon destinations, caterers, and the rehearsal dinner. Then one of Diane's friends asked how Madeline had become interested in marketing. Before Madeline could answer, I smiled. She started selling things before she could spell. Madeline looked at me. Mom. What? Everyone laughed. I continued. When she was 9, she made bookmarks from construction paper and tried to sell them to our neighbors for $2 each. That's adorable, one woman said. It gets better. She told everyone the money was for a school project. Madeline covered her face. It was not. The table laughed again. She made $14 before I caught her, I said. Robert made her return every penny. Diane smiled. So she was entrepreneurial from the beginning. Very. Madeline relaxed a little. Then another woman asked whether I had always lived in Richmond. I told her Robert and I had spent most of our marriage there. We didn't have much when Madeline was young, I said. There were years when I sewed half her clothes myself. I smiled at my daughter. She used to pick the fabric. Madeline's expression changed. It was subtle. But mothers notice things other people miss. Her smile froze. We really weren't that poor, Mom. The table became quieter. I didn't say we were. You make it sound like I grew up wearing curtains. I laughed softly. You certainly complained like that once or twice. Nobody else laughed. Madeline reached for her water. Diane changed the subject gracefully. The conversation moved on, but something between my daughter and me remained sitting at that table. After brunch, Madeline followed me into the hotel lobby. Mom, wait. I stopped. She glanced around before speaking. Why did you tell them that? Tell them what? That you made my clothes. Because I did. You made it sound like we were struggling. We were struggling. Her jaw tightened. People don't need to know that. I stared at her. Why not? Because they don't. That isn't an answer. She lowered her voice. Diane's friends are different. Different from whom, you know what I mean. No, Madeline. I don't. She exhaled sharply. These are people. Nathan's family has known for years. Some of them are clients. Some are business connections. And I don't want them getting the wrong impression. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What impression would that be that we... She stopped. That we... What? Madeline looked away. I waited. Finally she said, I just want everything to feel elegant. The word hung between us. Elegant. I looked down at myself. I was wearing navy slacks, a white blouse, and the earrings Diane had complimented. I looked back at my daughter. Including me. Her eyes widened. That's not fair. It was a question. You're twisting my words. Then straighten them. She didn't. Instead, she hugged her arms across her chest. You know how weddings are. Everyone notices everything. No, I said quietly. People notice what they're taught to be ashamed of. Her face hardened. I knew you'd take this personally. How else should I take it? I'm under a lot of pressure. I understand that. Do you? Yes. But I don't understand why your childhood has suddenly become something that needs editing. Madeline shook her head. I'm not editing anything. I thought about the purse, the stories she didn't want told, the way she had corrected me at brunch. I could have pushed harder. Maybe I should have. Instead, I touched her arm. You had a good childhood. I know. Your father worked hard. I know. So did I. I know, Mom. We didn't have everything. But you were loved. I said I know. There was irritation in her voice now. I removed my hand. All right. She immediately softened. Mom. It's fine. No, you're doing that thing. What thing? Where you say something is fine when it isn't. I almost laughed at the irony. You learned from the best. For a second she smiled. Then she looked exhausted. I'm sorry. I'm just overwhelmed. That explanation was easy to accept. So I accepted it. I told myself brides became stressed. I told myself Madeline was juggling work, wedding vendors, family expectations, and hundreds of decisions. I told myself Diane wasn't deliberately making her feel inferior. Most importantly, I told myself my daughter wasn't ashamed of me. But over the following days, the corrections continued. Madeline sent me photographs of shoes she thought would look more appropriate. She suggested I get my hair professionally styled. She asked whether I could avoid mentioning Robert's old plumbing business around Nathan's professional contacts. That one stopped me. Your father was proud of that business. I know. He worked 26 years building it. I'm not insulting Dad. It sounds like you don't want people knowing what he did. That's not what I said. It was becoming Madeline's favorite sentence. That's not what I said. But I had begun listening less to what she said and more to what she meant. One evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table looking through an old photo album. There was Madeline at 8 years old wearing a yellow dress I had sewn for Easter. She was missing one front tooth. Robert stood behind her in his work shirt, one hand resting on my shoulder. None of us looked elegant. We looked happy. I ran my finger across the photograph. If Robert had been alive, I wondered what he would have said. Probably something simple. Don't let anybody teach our girl to be ashamed of where she came from. My phone buzzed. A message from Madeline. Mom, I found some mother of dresses for you. Sending pictures now. 3 photographs appeared. All expensive. All glamorous. None looked remotely like me. I stared at them for a long time. Then another message arrived. Trust me. We need you looking perfect. We. Not I want you to feel beautiful. Not choose whatever makes you comfortable. We need you looking perfect. I set the phone face down. For the first time since Madeline announced her engagement, I wasn't thinking about flowers or photographs or how emotional I would become when I watched my daughter walk down the aisle. I was wondering what exactly Madeline believed was wrong with the mother she already had. I didn't know then that a dress would become our next argument. I didn't know that soon I would discover there wasn't even a seat waiting for me at the family table. And I certainly didn't know my daughter was moving toward a decision that would leave me standing at the entrance of Whitmore Estate while strangers searched a list that no longer contained my name. But that afternoon in the hotel lobby was the first moment I understood something had changed. Madeline wasn't simply planning her wedding. She was trying to create a version of her life that looked perfect from the outside, and little by little she was beginning to erase anything that didn't fit the picture, including me. The dress I chose was deep blue, not navy exactly. It had a softness to it like the sky just after sunset. The sleeves reached my elbows, the neckline was modest, and the fabric fell naturally instead of clinging to places I no longer felt the need to apologize for. When I tried it on, I recognized myself. That mattered to me. At 67, I had spent enough years learning that comfort in your own skin was worth more than approval from a room full of strangers. I bought the dress from a small boutique in Richmond 3 weeks before the wedding. The saleswoman smiled when I stepped out of the fitting room. That color loves you. I laughed. Well, at my age, I'll take love wherever I can get it. I sent Madeline a photograph. Her response arrived less than a minute later. Mom, did you buy that already? I stared at the message. Yes. Why? The phone rang immediately. Mom. The way she said it told me everything. What's wrong with it? It's not wrong. There was that word again. But it's just very simple. I am very simple. Can you please stop joking? I sat on the edge of my bed. I like the dress, Madeline. I know, but this is my wedding. I'm aware. You're the mother of the bride. I'm aware of that too. She exhaled. The photographs are going to last forever. So will my face. I assume you're letting me bring that. Mom. I closed my eyes. What do you want me to wear? I found something. Of course she had. 20 minutes later, photographs appeared on my phone. The dress Madeline chose was champagne-colored, heavily beaded around the neckline, and far more formal than anything I would normally wear. Then I saw the price. $875. I called her back. Absolutely not. I'll pay for it. That makes it worse. Why? Because I already have a dress. One that doesn't fit the venue. I became quiet. What does that mean? Whitmore Estate is formal. So am I attending a wedding or auditioning for the building? You're being difficult. That word stung more than it should have. I'm being difficult because I don't want an $800 dress. It's not about the money, I know. I let the silence sit between us. That was what bothered her, because we both knew what it was about. 2 days later, the champagne dress arrived at my house anyway. Madeline had ordered it in my size. I nearly sent it back unopened. Instead, I tried it on. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. The dress was beautiful. That wasn't the problem. It simply belonged to someone else. I thought of Robert. He had always liked me in blue. On our 40th anniversary, he took me to dinner and told me I looked exactly like the woman he had married, only with better judgment and more expensive glasses. I laughed aloud at the memory. Then my bedroom doorbell camera alerted my phone. Madeline had arrived. She came upstairs while I was still wearing the champagne dress. Her face lit up. "See?" She circled me. "This is so much better. Better than what the blue one." "No. You said this was better." She stopped. I looked at myself in the mirror again. "Madeline, do you like this because it looks good on me or because it looks expensive?" Her expression changed. "Why are you determined to turn everything into an accusation? I asked you a question, and I said you look beautiful. So did the woman at the boutique. That boutique isn't hosting 200 people at Whitmore Estate." There it was again, Whitmore Estate. As though the building itself had established a dress code for my worth. I slowly removed one of the earrings Madeline had brought to match the dress. "I'm wearing the blue one. Mom, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I don't think you do. I think I understand better than you realize." Her jaw tightened. "For one day, Mom, can you just trust me to know what fits?" I looked directly at her. Something in the room changed. "Fits what?" Madeline blinked. "The wedding. Or the family you want people to think you came from." Her face went pale. "That is incredibly unfair." "Is it?" "Yes." She stepped away. "You've been criticizing every decision I make. I haven't criticized your flowers, food, venue, invitations, or guest list. Then why are we fighting?" "Because none of those things require me to pretend to be somebody else." Madeline stared at me. Before she could respond, I heard footsteps downstairs. "Madeline, Nathan." She looked toward the hallway. A moment later, he appeared at the bedroom door carrying 2 paper bags. "I brought lunch." Then he saw us. I was standing in an expensive champagne dress while my daughter looked ready to cry. Nathan stopped. "Did I walk into something?" "No," Madeline said immediately. "Yes," I said at the same time. Nathan looked from one of us to the other. I almost smiled. Madeline didn't. "It's just the dress," she said. Nathan looked at me. "You look great. Thank you." Madeline folded her arms. Nathan sensed the danger too late. "But didn't you have a blue one?" I turned toward him. "You saw it." Madeline showed me the picture. And he shrugged. "I liked it." Madeline stared at him. "Nathan, what the champagne one photographs better." He frowned. "I thought Wilma liked the blue one." "She does. Then what am I missing?" Nobody answered. Nathan set the food on the dresser. "I thought the whole point was for everybody to enjoy the day." "It is," Madeline said. "Then let your mother wear the dress she likes." Her expression hardened. "You don't understand." He looked genuinely confused. "Apparently not." Madeline quickly changed the subject. She asked him about a call with the florist. Within seconds, she had moved the conversation away from me. But I noticed something important. Nathan had not known. He had not told Madeline my dress was inappropriate. He had not asked her to make me look wealthier. Whatever was happening, Madeline was doing it without his encouragement. After lunch, Nathan went downstairs to take a work call. Madeline stayed behind. "You embarrassed me." I stared at her. How? How? By making it sound like I'm controlling you. You ordered me a dress after I told you I already bought one. I was trying to help. Then help me understand something." She sighed. "What? Does Nathan know you asked me not to talk about your father's plumbing business?" Her eyes shifted. "That was answer enough. Does he know you don't want me telling people I used to sew your clothes, Mom? Does he know?" I nodded. "Why not?" "Not because he wouldn't understand. I think he would understand perfectly." She grabbed her purse. "I can't do this right now." "Madeline." She stopped at the doorway. "I love you." Her shoulders softened slightly. "I love you too. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them make you ashamed of yourself. I'm not ashamed of you." "Then stop treating me like something that needs polishing before your new family sees me." Her eyes filled, but she looked away. For one hopeful second, I thought she might sit down. Instead, she said, "Keep the champagne dress, just in case you change your mind." Then she left. I stood alone in my bedroom. The expensive dress still covered my body. The blue one hung quietly on the closet door. I changed immediately. I folded the champagne dress carefully and returned it to its box. Then I hung my blue dress where I could see it. That should have been the end of the argument. But that evening, something Nathan had said kept returning to me. I thought Wilma liked the blue one. He had sounded completely unaware there was a problem. I began reconsidering every uncomfortable moment from the previous weeks: the purse, the stories, my hair, Robert's business, the brunch. Each time Madeline had mentioned Diane Nathan's family important guests, or Whitmore Estate. But had any of them actually asked her to change me? I couldn't remember a single occasion when Nathan had done so. Even Diane, for all her talk about presentation, had complimented my inexpensive earrings and listened politely to my stories. The person correcting me was always Madeline. That realization frightened me more than if Diane had been responsible. Because you can protect yourself from another family's judgment. It is much harder to protect yourself from your own child's shame. A few days later, Madeline called as though our argument had never happened. She asked me to come over and help organize some wedding materials. I agreed. Of course I did. She was still my daughter. I still loved her. And somewhere inside me, I was still hoping this was nothing more than wedding stress. When I arrived at her house, binders and printed pages covered the dining table. Madeline went upstairs to take a call. I began straightening the papers. That was when I saw the seating chart. I wasn't snooping. My eyes simply moved across the page. Nathan Caldwell, Diane Caldwell, members of both families, bridesmaids, groomsmen, close friends. Then I looked at the table reserved for immediate family. I read every name once. Then again. I searched the entire page. My name wasn't there. I stood completely still. After everything Madeline had tried to change about me, I had believed the worst question was whether my dress was elegant enough. Looking at that seating chart, I realized there was a much more painful question waiting for me. Was my daughter planning to give me a seat at all? I read the seating chart 3 times, not because the print was small, because I kept expecting my name to appear if I looked carefully enough. The sheet was larger than standard paper, printed in neat columns with table numbers beside each guest. Madeline had always been organized. Even as a child, she arranged her crayons by color and became upset if someone returned the blue one to the wrong section. This chart was no different. Nathan Caldwell, Diane Caldwell, Nathan's aunt and uncle, Madeline's bridesmaids, the best man, close family friends. At table 1, directly in front of the dance floor, I recognized nearly every name, except mine. I moved my finger down the page. Table 2. Table 3. Table 4. Nothing. Maybe Madeline had placed me somewhere special. Maybe the mother of the bride had a different designation. I checked again. There were almost 200 names. Wilma Langford was not one of them. My first instinct was to make an excuse for her. That is what mothers do longer than we should. We explain away the things our children do, because accepting the obvious can hurt more than believing the unlikely. It was an unfinished chart. A printing error. Another page existed. My name had accidentally been omitted. Anything except the possibility already forming in my mind. I heard Madeline coming downstairs. I remained beside the dining table. She entered carrying her phone. Sorry, that was the florist. Apparently peonies have become a national emergency. Then she saw what I was holding. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. What's this? I asked. The seating chart. I gathered that. She walked toward me and reached for it. I didn't release it immediately. Where am I sitting? Her eyes dropped to the page. We're still moving people around. Where am I sitting now, Mom? It's a simple question. She took the chart from my hands. This isn't final. I looked at the other pages spread across the table. Most had dates printed in the corner. This was updated yesterday. Yes, but that doesn't mean it's final. I nodded slowly. All right. So where were you planning to put me? Madeline rubbed her forehead. I don't know yet. That answer hurt more than I expected. You don't know where the mother of the bride is sitting. There are complicated family dynamics, Nathan has divorced relatives. Diane has people who can't sit together. There are business guests. It's a mess. I'm not asking about them. I know. Then where am I supposed to sit? She sighed. Why are you making this into a confrontation? I almost laughed. A month earlier, I might have apologized. Instead, I looked at her. Because my name is missing. It's not personal. There are sentences that become cruel precisely because they are spoken casually. I repeated it. Not personal, you know what I mean. No, Madeline. I'm starting to realize I often don't. She dropped the seating chart onto the table. I haven't finished it. I looked at table 1 again. Diane's name was there. So was Nathan's father, his grandmother, 2 of his aunts. Even Diane's longtime friend had a seat assignment. Your future mother-in-law has a place. Of course she does. I waited. Madeline heard her own words a second too late. Her face softened. Mom, that's not what I meant. I picked up my purse. I hope not. She followed me toward the kitchen. Please don't leave angry. I'm not angry. That was true. Anger would have been easier. I was beginning to feel something quieter, something colder. I'm just tired of asking whether I fit into my own daughter's wedding. Madeline's shoulders dropped. You fit. Then stop making me prove it. Neither of us spoke. After a moment, she reached for my hand. I'm sorry. I wanted to believe her. So badly that I almost decided the conversation was over. Then I promise we'll figure out the seating. We. Figure out. As though finding a chair for me required a committee. I gently removed my hand. And I'm going home. Before I reached the front door, she called after me. Wait, I need something from you. I turned. Madeline disappeared upstairs and returned carrying an empty canvas tote. Do you still have Grandma Eleanor's wedding handkerchief? The question surprised me. My mother's, yes. The embroidered one. I did. My mother had carried that handkerchief when she married my father in 1951. I carried it at my wedding to Robert tucked inside my bouquet. When Madeline was a teenager, I once showed it to her and explained that someday if she wanted it, she could carry it too. Her face had lit up. Something old, she had said. Something very old, Robert joked. My mother had chased him around the kitchen with a dish towel. I smiled at the memory. It's in the cedar chest. Madeline looked relieved. I want to use it. For the first time that afternoon, her voice sounded like my daughter again. Not the bride, not the marketing professional, not the woman measuring everything against Diane Caldwell's expectations. Just my little girl. Of course, I said. Her smile returned. The coordinator needs it at Whitmore before the rehearsal dinner. They're photographing some detail pieces with the rings and invitations. When Friday afternoon. I'll be running around all day. Could you bring it? I hesitated. Why don't you take it now? I'm afraid I'll lose it. I understood that. Fine. She hugged me. Thank you, Mom. I drove home feeling more confused than before. One minute I seemed inconvenient. The next Madeline wanted the most precious object I had from my mother woven into her wedding. That evening I opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. The smell of old wood and lavender rose from inside. Beneath photographs, Robert's military papers, baby blankets, and several letters tied with ribbon. I found the small wooden box. Inside was the handkerchief. Ivory linen, tiny embroidered flowers, the initials EM stitched into one corner. I held it carefully. 4 generations of women seemed connected through that small square of fabric. My mother had not been wealthy. She worked in a school cafeteria for 23 years. Her hands were rough from detergent and hot water. She had one good winter coat and wore it for nearly 15 years. But I had never once been ashamed of her. When I became an event coordinator and started working with wealthy families, my mother sometimes worried she would embarrass me. She never did. Once at an elaborate wedding reception, she whispered, Wilma, everybody here looks like they own a bank. I whispered back, half of them probably owe one money. She laughed so loudly 3 people turned around. I smiled at the memory. Then I thought about Madeline. My smile disappeared. She wanted my mother's handkerchief. She wanted the tradition, the history, the sentimental photograph. But lately I wondered whether she wanted the people who had created that history. I placed the handkerchief back inside the wooden box. For the next several days, Madeline and I spoke mostly about practical things: flowers, transportation, weather. She never mentioned the seating chart again. Neither did I. Then one afternoon, Nathan stopped by my house. He had come to return a casserole dish. I invited him inside. "You look tired," I told him. "I'm marrying your daughter in less than 2 weeks. That'll do it." He laughed. We sat at the kitchen table. Nathan had always been easy to talk to. There was something reassuring about him. He didn't perform politeness. He simply behaved decently when nobody seemed to be watching. "How's Madeline?" I asked. "Stressed, I noticed. She wants everything perfect, so I've heard." Nathan smiled. "Once we get through the wedding, she'll relax." I studied him. "Do you care whether everything is perfect?" He shook his head. "I care whether she shows up." I laughed. "That's a reasonable standard, and whether you show up." Something inside me tightened. Me. Of course. He took a sip of coffee. Madeline would never forgive herself if her mother wasn't there. I looked at him for a long moment. Nathan noticed. "What nothing?" I almost told him about the seating chart, but doing so felt like inviting him into an argument he didn't yet understand. And if I was wrong, I would be creating unnecessary tension days before his wedding. So I smiled. "I'll be there." At least I believed I would. After Nathan left, I stood at the sink thinking about his words. Madeline would never forgive herself if her mother wasn't there. He sounded certain. Which told me something else. Whatever Madeline was doing, Nathan wasn't part of it. That night, I received a message from her. "Don't forget Grandma's handkerchief Friday. Please take it directly to the venue coordinator." I replied, "I won't forget." Then I opened my calendar. Friday, Whitmore Estate. Seeing those two words written together brought back memories I had worked hard to leave alone. Judith Whitmore laughing in the old office. Robert carrying folding chairs through the rain. Me standing in the unfinished ballroom with a clipboard wondering whether any bride would ever trust us enough to hold a wedding there. I hadn't returned in decades. Now my daughter was sending me back carrying a piece of our family history. The irony wasn't lost on me. Still, I had no idea how cruel that irony was about to become. The next morning, Madeline emailed me an updated weekend schedule. I scanned it. Hair appointments, vendor arrivals, photography, ceremony, reception. There were details for almost everyone, but the rehearsal dinner section contained only one line: "Private event confirmed guests only." I stared at those words. Confirmed guests only. My mind returned to the seating chart, to my missing name, to Madeline telling me they were still figuring things out. I closed the email. Then I looked across the room at the wooden box containing my mother's handkerchief. A strange thought entered my mind. Madeline had made absolutely certain that her grandmother's name would be represented at the wedding through tradition. But she still hadn't told me where her mother would sit. And for the first time, I stopped wondering whether my missing name was an accident. I started wondering whether it was a warning. 2 days before the rehearsal dinner, I realized I still didn't know what time I was supposed to be there. That may sound like a small detail, but weddings are built from small details. Arrival times, photographs, transportation, flowers, who stands where, who sits beside whom. And after weeks of hearing Madeline discuss every minute of that weekend, the absence of one simple piece of information began to feel deliberate. I opened the schedule she had emailed me again. Friday. Bridal party preparations. Venue access at 3. Rehearsal at 5. Rehearsal dinner at 7. Private event confirmed guests only. No instructions for me. I called Madeline. She didn't answer. 10 minutes later, she texted. "In meeting." "Everything okay?" I typed. "What time should I arrive Friday?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, for the handkerchief, I stared at the question. For the rehearsal dinner. Another long pause. Then my phone rang. "Hi, Mom." Madeline sounded breathless. "Did I catch you at a bad time?" "No." I stepped out. "I just need to know when you want me at Whitmore on Friday." Silence. Then she said, "Actually, things have gotten a little complicated." There was that feeling again. The one I had begun recognizing before Madeline said something she didn't want to say. Complicated how, the numbers. What numbers, for the dinner? I sat down at my kitchen table. What about them were over capacity for the room we originally booked? I frowned. Whitmore has several rooms. I know, Mom. Of course I knew. Better than she realized. But I kept that thought to myself. So what are you doing? We've had to adjust. Adjust what the guest count. I waited. Madeline didn't continue. Am I part of that adjustment? Why do you always assume the worst? I asked what time to arrive. I know. And instead of giving me a time, you started talking about capacity. She exhaled. Can we not do this right now? Do what turn every wedding decision into a referendum on whether I love you? The words landed hard. I lowered my voice. I have never asked whether you love me. You imply it. No. I've asked whether you respect me. Silence. I could hear muffled voices behind her. Mom, I have to go back inside. Fine. Just bring the handkerchief to the venue around 4. Give it to the coordinator. And the dinner I'll call you later. She hung up. I remained at the table with the phone in my hand. She did not call later. That evening I ate dinner alone. Tomato soup and half a grilled cheese sandwich. Robert used to tease me about making grilled cheese whenever I was upset. You cook for everybody else when you're happy, he once said. When you're mad, you eat like a college student. I smiled at the memory. Then I looked at the empty chair across from me. I wish you were here. Here, I whispered. The house gave no answer. I had spent 4 years learning how to make decisions without Robert. The big decisions had actually been easier than the small ones. Insurance, repairs, taxes. Those came with paperwork and numbers. But when your daughter hurts you, there is no form explaining what to do next. Part of me wanted to call Madeline again. Another part wanted to wait and see whether she would call me. She didn't. The next morning, I was watering the herbs on my back porch when my phone chimed. An email. The sender was Caroline Reed, one of the wedding coordinators. The subject line read, Updated, Friday timeline, Langford, Caldwell wedding. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Madeline had once included me in the planning email chain months earlier when she wanted my opinion about transportation. I opened it. The message began with cheerful professional language. Hello everyone. We're looking forward to welcoming you to Whitmore Estate this Friday as we begin the wedding weekend for Madeline and Nathan. Below is the final rehearsal and dinner schedule. I scrolled. Wedding party arrival. Immediate family photographs. Rehearsal. Cocktail hour. Dinner. There were detailed instructions for vendors and family members. I read every line. My name wasn't mentioned. I scrolled farther. Near the bottom was a section titled Final Guest Count Notes. Most of it was logistical. 2 dietary changes, 1 late confirmation, a high chair added. Then I saw my name. For one foolish second, I felt relief. There I am. Then I read the sentence. Per bride's request, Wilma Langford has been removed from the final guest count for Friday evening. I stopped breathing. I read it again. Per bride's request. Not venue capacity. Not coordinator recommendation. Not an accidental omission. Per bride's request. My daughter had asked them to remove me. I put the phone down. Then I picked it up and read the sentence a third time. Sometimes the truth is so painful that your mind keeps checking whether the words might rearrange themselves. They didn't. Wilma Langford. Removed. Bride's request. I sat on the porch steps. The morning was beautiful. Birds moved through the maple tree. A lawnmower started somewhere down the street. Someone's dog barked. The ordinary world continued while something inside me cracked open. I thought about the seating chart. Her hesitation. The dress. The purse. My hair. The stories she didn't want me telling. My husband's plumbing business. Every moment I had explained away suddenly lined up in front of me. Madeline hadn't forgotten where to seat me. She had been deciding where she could remove me. I went inside. The wooden box containing my mother's handkerchief sat on the dining room table. I touched the lid. That was when the humiliation became anger. Not loud anger. I have never been someone who throws things or screams. Mine was the kind that made everything very clear. Madeline wanted the handkerchief. She wanted her grandmother represented in photographs. She wanted something old, something meaningful, something that told everyone she came from generations of love. But she had removed the living woman who carried that history to her. I picked up my phone. For several minutes, I simply stared at Madeline's name. Then I called. She answered on the fourth ring. Mom, are you alone? A pause. Yes. I received an email from Caroline Reed. Another pause. This one longer. What email? The updated Friday timeline. Oh. That single word told me she knew. I read the final guest count. Silence. Madeline. I'm here. Did you ask them to remove my name? Mom, let me explain. Yes or no? It's complicated. No. It was complicated yesterday. Today I'm asking a yes or no question. She didn't answer. I closed my eyes. Did you ask them to remove me? Very quietly, she said. Yes. I had known. I had read it myself. Still hearing my daughter admit it was different. I felt as if someone had pushed a hand into my chest. Why the dinner got bigger than we expected. You told me that. It did. Who stayed? What who stayed after you removed me? Mom, please. Diane's friends. That's not fair. Nathan's business contacts. They're not Nathan's business contacts. Then who was important enough that the bride's mother had to go? You're still coming to the wedding. I almost couldn't believe she said it. That wasn't my question. I'm trying to tell you this isn't what you think. What do I think? That I don't want you there. You specifically asked someone to remove my name. From one dinner. One dinner. I repeated the phrase slowly. The dinner where the families come together before you get married. Madeline became defensive. It's not the ceremony. So I'm your mother on Saturday, but inconvenient on Friday. That's not what I said. I laughed once. There was no humor in it. No. You're right. You didn't say it. Mom. You wrote it. Silence. I heard her breathing. Then she said, "Can we talk tonight?" Why tonight? Because I don't want to do this over the phone. Neither did I. For the first time, I wanted to look into my daughter's face when she explained why I was the easiest person to erase. All right. Come around 6, I'll be there. Before she hung up, Madeline said, Mom, yes, I love you. Normally, I would have said it immediately. I love you too. This time the words caught in my throat. I know, I finally said. Then I ended the call. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved through my house without accomplishing anything. I folded towels that were already folded. I wiped a clean countertop. I opened the refrigerator twice without wanting food. At 5:30, I went upstairs to change. The champagne-colored dress Madeline had bought me was still inside its box. My blue dress hung beside the closet. I stood between them. Two dresses, two versions of me. One was the mother Madeline had. The other seemed to be the mother she wanted people to see. I chose neither. I put on black slacks and a pale blue blouse. Before leaving, I stopped beside a framed photograph of Robert. It had been taken on our 38th anniversary. He was smiling at me instead of the camera. You would tell me not to yell, I whispered. Then I smiled sadly. And 5 minutes later, you'd probably be yelling. I picked up my purse. The drive to Madeline's house took 23 minutes. I spent every one of them asking myself the same question. Why not why she removed me? I was beginning to understand that. The deeper question was why my daughter had become so ashamed of the life that raised her. When I pulled into her driveway, Madeline was waiting at the door. She looked exhausted, no makeup, hair tied back. For a second, I saw the little girl who used to wait for me after school. Then she opened the door. Hi, Mom. Hello, Madeline. She stepped aside. I entered. On the dining table was the seating chart I had seen days earlier. Beside it sat a printed guest list. Madeline followed my eyes. I thought we should talk about everything. So do I. We sat across from each other. Neither of us touched the papers. Finally, I placed my phone between us and opened the email. I enlarged the sentence. Per bride's request, Wilma Langford has been removed from the final guest count for Friday evening. Then I turned the screen toward my daughter. I don't want another explanation about capacity. Madeline looked down. I don't want another explanation about complicated seating. Her eyes filled. I want the truth. She swallowed. Mom, all of it. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she looked at me. And what I saw in her face frightened me more than the email had. It wasn't anger, it wasn't irritation, it was shame. Not shame for what she had done, at least not yet. It was the same shame I had seen when I talked about sewing her childhood clothes. The same shame when I mentioned Robert's plumbing business. The same shame behind every request to change my appearance. And suddenly I understood that the rehearsal dinner was never really about numbers. Madeline had removed my name because there was something about me she did not want those people to see. Now I needed her to say it. Madeline stared at the email on my phone as if she had never seen the words before. But we both knew she had. I waited. For once, I wasn't going to rescue her from an uncomfortable silence. When she was little, I had always done that. If she forgot her lines in a school play, I whispered them from the audience. If she broke something and was afraid to tell Robert, I stood beside her while she confessed. But Madeline was 39 years old, and this time she needed to find her own words. Finally, she pushed my phone toward me. I didn't know Caroline would include that note. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's what you're worried about, no? It sounds like it. I'm saying it wasn't supposed to be sent to you. I leaned back. Would it hurt less if I never found out? She closed her eyes. That isn't what I mean. Then tell me what you mean. Madeline stood and walked toward the window. For several seconds, she looked outside. There are going to be people at that dinner who matter to Nathan's family. I felt my stomach tighten. We established that. Diane invited several couples they've known for years, and some of them are important professionally. Important. I repeated the word. Madeline turned. Please don't do that. Do what repeat everything like I've said something terrible. Then say something that doesn't sound terrible. Her eyes flashed. You came here wanting the fight. No. I came here wanting an explanation. You've already decided what you think. I think my daughter removed me from her rehearsal dinner. You're still coming to the wedding. Her voice rose. Mine didn't. That doesn't answer why. Madeline pressed both hands against the edge of the table. You want the truth, yes. Fine. She took a breath. I'm worried about how you'll be around them. There it was. The sentence was almost quiet, but I felt it like a slap. How I'll be? You know what I mean. No, Madeline. Tonight you're going to explain everything. She looked away. You tell stories. I talk to people. You tell personal stories. About my family. Exactly. I stared at her. Your family. Yes. You mean you. Her silence answered me. I thought about the brunch. The clothes I made you. She said nothing. Your father's plumbing business. Still nothing. Our house, Mom. Is our house embarrassing too? No. The vacations we couldn't afford. Stop. The used station wagon your father drove until the passenger door wouldn't open, I said. Stop. Why? Her eyes filled. Because you make everything sound small. The room went silent. Madeline looked as shocked by her own words as I was. Small, I repeated. She wiped at her eyes. That isn't what I meant. I think it is. I mean, you tell these stories like they're funny. Some of them are. But people hear them differently. What people Diane's friends, her business circle, Nathan's colleagues. I shook my head. Nathan told me he only cares whether I show up. Madeline froze. You talked to Nathan? He brought back my casserole dish. What did you tell him? The panic in her voice gave me another answer. Nothing. She visibly relaxed. That hurt too. You haven't told him any of this, have you? This isn't about Nathan. It should be. He's the man you're marrying. He wouldn't understand. Funny. You said the same thing about the dress. Madeline sat down again. Mom, Nathan grew up differently. So his family knows people I've spent years trying to be taken seriously by. I watched my daughter carefully. Now we were finally getting close to the truth. What are you afraid they'll discover? She looked at me. That I don't belong. My anger paused. For the first time that evening, I saw something beneath her cruelty. Fear. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it explained where some of it came from. Madeline, I said quietly, you are marrying Nathan. You aren't applying for membership in his family. You don't understand. Then help me. She laughed bitterly. Do you know what it's like walking into a room with Diane? Everyone knows her. Everyone knows where she went to school, where Nathan went to school, which clubs they belong to, where they vacation. And then they ask me where I grew up. In Richmond. In a little brick house. A good little brick house. I know. Do you? She looked down. I spent years building my career. I learned how to speak in those rooms, how to dress, how to make people see me as someone who belongs there. My chest tightened. And I'm evidence that you don't. She immediately shook her head. No. Then why remove me? I panicked. About what? She looked directly at me. That you'd start telling stories. About raising you, yes. About your father, yes. About sewing your dresses, yes. Each answer was quieter. I felt tears gathering, but I refused to let them fall. You were never hungry. I know. You never went without Christmas presents. I know. Your father worked 6 days a week so you could take dance lessons. I know. I worked weddings on weekends and came home at midnight, then got up Sunday morning to make breakfast. I know. Then what part of that embarrasses you? Madeline covered her face. I don't know. That isn't true. She dropped her hands. Because I don't want them looking at me differently. Her voice cracked. I stared at her. They already respect you. You don't know that, and you think hiding me will make them respect you more? I just wanted one night where I didn't have to worry. One night. Yes. She stood again, pacing now. It's one dinner, Mom. Not the marriage. The sentence stopped me. I had been hurt before. But there are moments when someone says something that changes the shape of the hurt. It's one dinner, Mom. Not the marriage. I slowly stood. No, I said. It's the night before your marriage, and you decided your mother was the one person who didn't belong there. Madeline's face crumpled. I didn't say you don't belong. You didn't need to. You're making this bigger than it is. No. I think I've been making it smaller than it is for weeks. I picked up the printed guest list. Who stayed? Please don't. I scanned it. There were names I barely recognized. Friends of Diane. Neighbors of Nathan's parents. People Madeline had met only a handful of times. I placed the list down. You found room for people who barely know you. They're part of Nathan's family circle, and I'm your mother. She started crying. I wanted to comfort her. That instinct was immediate, automatic. My daughter cried, and some ancient part of me wanted to cross the table and hold her. I didn't. Not because I wanted her to suffer, because comforting her too quickly would allow her to escape what she had done. You're still invited to the ceremony, she whispered. I looked at her. She actually believed that should make me feel better. So when there are 200 people watching you walk down the aisle, I'm acceptable. That isn't what I mean. But the night before, when you're introducing families and talking privately, I'm not. I was trying to manage things. Me. What you were trying to manage me. She shook her head. I was trying to manage the situation. I am not a situation, Madeline. She became silent. I am your mother. I know. Do you? Yes. Because lately you seem to treat me like a detail that doesn't match the decorations. That's cruel. No. Cruel was deleting my name and hoping I wouldn't notice. She wiped her cheeks. I'm sorry. I wanted those words to be enough. They weren't. Are you sorry you did it? She looked at me. Or sorry I found out. She couldn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I picked up my purse. Mom, don't leave. I need to. What about Friday? I stopped. The handkerchief. Yes. For 1 second I almost laughed. After everything we had said, she was still thinking about the handkerchief. Then I realized what it represented. She wanted the symbol of our family, even if she didn't want me at the table. I promised to bring it, I said. Madeline looked confused. You're still going to— I keep my promises. You can just give it to me now. No. Why? Because you asked me to take it to Whitmore Estate, and that's what I'll do. She hesitated. Are you planning to come to the dinner anyway? I stared at her. No. Relief crossed her face. Only for a second. But I saw it. And that tiny flash of relief hurt more than almost anything she had said. I would never force my way into a room where my daughter made it clear I wasn't wanted. Her face changed. Mom. Good night, Madeline. I walked toward the door. She followed me. What about Saturday? I stopped with my hand on the knob. What about it? You'll still come to the wedding, right? I turned. For the first time, fear replaced defensiveness in her eyes. She had assumed I would absorb Friday's humiliation and still appear Saturday morning smiling for photographs. That was the role I had always played. The dependable mother. The woman who forgave before anyone properly apologized. I don't know, I said. Her mouth opened. Mom, I mean it. But you can't miss my wedding, and you thought I could miss your rehearsal dinner. That's different. It is. But maybe not in the way you think. I opened the door. The evening air was cool. Wilma. She almost never called me by my first name. I turned. I do love you, she said. I believed her. That was what made everything so painful. I love you too, I said. Then I left. I cried in the car. Not dramatically. I simply sat behind the steering wheel while tears rolled down my cheeks. I thought of Robert. I wished he were sitting beside me. I wished he could tell me whether I was being too hard. Then I imagined what he would say. Our daughter can make mistakes, Wilma, but she doesn't get to make you smaller. I drove home. The wooden box was waiting on my dining table. I opened it. My mother's handkerchief lay inside. I touched the embroidered initials. My mother had cleaned school cafeterias, stretched grocery money, patched clothes, and never once apologized for the life she gave me. Neither had Robert. Neither had I. Until Madeline started acting as though we should. I closed the box. Friday afternoon, I would take that handkerchief to Whitmore Estate. Not because Madeline deserved another favor, because I had given my word I would hand it to the coordinator. Then I would leave. No confrontation, no scene, no begging for a seat. At least that was the plan. What I didn't know was that the moment I walked through the doors of Whitmore Estate, the past I had kept hidden for 34 years would be waiting for me. And before that night was over, my daughter would discover that the woman she was too embarrassed to seat at her table had once been welcomed through those doors for reasons Madeline could never have imagined. Friday afternoon arrived with the kind of clear blue sky wedding planners pray for. At 3:30, I stood in my bedroom holding my mother's wooden box. I had already decided what I would wear. Nothing dramatic. Cream slacks, a pale blue blouse, low heels, and the brown leather purse Madeline had suggested replacing. I looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't asking whether my daughter would approve. I was simply Wilma Langford. That would have to be enough. I placed the wooden box carefully on the passenger seat and began the drive toward Whitmore Estate. The farther I traveled from Richmond, the more familiar the landscape became. New subdivisions had appeared where there used to be open fields. Gas stations stood at intersections I remembered as nothing more than stop signs. But when I turned onto the road leading toward the estate, something inside me tightened. Then I saw the entrance. 34 years disappeared. The old wooden sign was gone, replaced by stone pillars bearing the words Whitmore Estate in elegant iron lettering. Beyond them stretched a perfectly paved driveway. I slowed the car. You should sit now, Robert, I whispered. The first time Robert and I had driven through those gates, the driveway had been gravel. Half of it had washed away after 3 days of rain. Robert had complained about what the mud would do to his truck. I had told him to stop whining. He told me I was bossy. I told him that was why people hired me. I smiled at the memory. Then the main house came into view. I nearly stopped the car. The transformation was extraordinary. The brick had been restored. White columns framed the entrance. Gardens stretched across land that had once been patchy grass and weeds. Elegant lanterns lined the walkway. Guests moved between buildings carrying garment bags and flower boxes. Whitmore Estate looked exactly like the place Madeline had described. Sophisticated, expensive, perfect. But I could still see the bones underneath. I remembered Judith Whitmore standing beside me in the old carriage house while rain leaked through the roof into 3 metal buckets. I remembered moving folding tables myself because we couldn't afford enough staff. I remembered the first bride who trusted us with her reception. I remembered Robert repairing a broken pipe 20 minutes before guests arrived. Those memories came so quickly that I had to blink them away. I parked. For a moment, I remained behind the wheel. I hadn't spoken to Judith in nearly 25 years. There had been Christmas cards for a while. Then life happened. Robert's business grew. Madeline entered high school, then college. My career changed direction. Judith became busier. The cards stopped. I had followed Whitmore Estate from a distance occasionally, usually through newspaper features or wedding magazines. I knew Judith had succeeded. I just hadn't realized how much. I picked up the wooden box. I'm only delivering this, I reminded myself. That was important. I wasn't attending the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't confronting Madeline. I wasn't demanding anything. I was keeping a promise. Inside the main building, the air smelled faintly of flowers and polished wood. A young woman stood behind a welcome table near the entrance. "Good afternoon," she said brightly. "Are you here for the Langford Caldwell rehearsal?" The question caught me off guard. Technically, yes. Emotionally, absolutely not. I'm delivering something for the bride. Of course. May I have your name? Wilma Langford. Her smile remained in place as she looked down at a tablet. Then she scrolled. Her smile faded slightly. "Could you spell the last name Langford?" she typed, then checked a printed sheet. "I'm sorry. One moment." My stomach tightened. "I'm the bride's mother." The young woman looked embarrassed. "Oh." She searched again. "I'm sure it's just—" she self. "Just what?" A mistake I already knew it wasn't. Another employee approached. "Everything okay?" The young woman lowered her voice. "I'm trying to locate Ms. Langford." The second woman looked at me. "Wilma Langford." "Yes." She took the printed list. Her eyes moved down the page. Then she turned it over. "I'm sorry, Ms. Langford. You're not on the final guest list." I held the wooden box tighter. "I'm aware." That seemed to confuse her. "I'm only here to deliver this to Caroline Reed." "Certainly. We can take it for you." I should have handed over the box. That had been my plan. But before I could, the first employee looked toward a side table. "I just want to verify something." She picked up another sheet. I saw my name before she could move it away. Wilma Langford. A line had been drawn through it. Beside my name were several small typed words. "Removed per bride request." I had already read almost the same sentence in the email. But seeing my name physically crossed out did something different to me. A name is such a small thing. A few letters. But when it is yours, and your own child has ordered someone to strike it through, it feels strangely like watching yourself disappear. The employee noticed where I was looking. Her face reddened. "I'm very sorry. You don't need to apologize. I meant it." She hadn't done this. Behind me, the front doors opened. Several guests entered laughing. I stepped aside. One woman glanced toward me, then another. I became painfully aware that I was standing at the entrance holding a small wooden box, while two employees tried to explain why the bride's mother wasn't allowed into the event. "I'll leave this with you," I said. I started to extend the box. Then I heard Madeline's voice. "Caroline said the photographer is ready for—" She stopped. I turned. My daughter stood 20 feet away. She wore a fitted black dress, her hair professionally styled. For a moment, neither of us moved. Madeline looked at me, then at the employees, then at the guest list. She understood immediately. I waited. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I wanted her to walk over and say, "She's my mother." Maybe I wanted her to tell them I could come inside. Maybe I wanted one last piece of evidence that when humiliation became real, not theoretical, not hidden inside an email, my daughter would choose me. She didn't. "Mom," she finally said. Her voice was quiet. "I brought Grandma's handkerchief." Madeline nodded. Okay. Just okay. The second employee looked between us. Would you like me to add Ms. Langford back to the list? The question hung in the air. Madeline could have fixed it with one word. Yes. She looked toward the ballroom, then toward me. It's complicated. Something inside me went completely still. Not broken. Still. I had heard enough. No, I said. The employee looked at me. No need. I held the wooden box toward Madeline. She hesitated before taking it. Our hands touched for half a second. This belonged to your grandmother, I said. Please be careful with it. I will. I nodded. Neither of us mentioned tomorrow. Neither of us mentioned whether I would attend the wedding. I turned toward the doors. Behind me, conversation resumed. Somewhere deeper inside the estate, musicians were testing sound equipment. People laughed, glasses clinked. A celebration was beginning, and the bride's mother was walking out. I reached the entrance. My hand touched the brass door handle. That was when a memory struck me. I had stood almost exactly there 34 years earlier. The doors had been different then, cheap wooden ones that swelled whenever it rained. Judith had been beside me, exhausted and terrified. We had just finished the estate's first successful large wedding. After the last guests left, Judith sat on the front steps and cried. We might actually survive, she had whispered. I sat beside her. Yes, I told her. You might. She laughed through her tears. No, Wilma. We might. I had forgotten those words. Standing there now, I remembered them perfectly. I almost turned around. Not to tell Madeline, not to prove anything. Simply because for the first time I wondered whether Judith was still here. But I stopped myself. This wasn't the time. I pushed the door open. Wilma. I froze. The voice came from behind me, older than I remembered, but unmistakable. I slowly turned. A woman stood at the far end of the foyer. Silver hair framed her face. She wore a dark green suit, and one hand rested against the staircase railing. For several seconds she simply stared. Then her hand rose to her mouth. Wilma Langford. My heart seemed to stop. Judith Whitmore. Older, elegant, but unmistakably Judith. She took one step toward me, then another. Is that really you? The employees looked at her, then at me. Madeline had turned around too. Her expression changed when she realized the owner of Whitmore Estate was walking directly toward the woman whose name she had just allowed to remain crossed off the guest list. I didn't move. Judith came closer, her eyes filling with recognition. And suddenly I knew I wasn't going to make it through those doors unnoticed. The past had just called me by name. For several seconds, Judith Whitmore and I simply stared at each other. 34 years is a long time. Long enough for dark hair to turn silver. Long enough for children to grow up and marry. Long enough to lose husbands, change careers, move through grief, and convince yourself that certain chapters of your life have been permanently closed. But apparently not long enough to forget a face. Judith walked toward me faster than I expected. Oh my God, she whispered. It is you. Before I could answer, she wrapped both arms around me. I stood frozen for half a second. Then I hugged her back. The years disappeared. You look wonderful, she said, holding my shoulders. So do you. That is a generous lie. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I had managed all afternoon. Judith touched my cheek. Wilma Langford. I cannot believe you are standing here. I could say the same thing. This is my building. That does give you an advantage. She laughed loudly. That laugh hadn't changed. I remembered hearing it inside an unfinished ballroom when neither of us had any idea whether Whitmore Estate would survive another year. Then Judith looked around. Her expression shifted. Wait. Why are you standing by the door? I felt the room tighten around us. It's nothing. Judith knew me too well for that answer even after decades. Nothing, I was just leaving. Leaving, yes. She looked toward the reception table, then toward the ballroom entrance. Are you here for the Caldwell rehearsal dinner? I hesitated. My daughter is the bride. Judith stared at me. Madeline. Yes. Her mouth opened. Madeline Langford is your daughter. I smiled faintly. She has been for 39 years. Judith turned toward Madeline. My daughter still stood several yards away holding the wooden box. Her face had gone pale. Judith looked delighted. You didn't tell me, Madeline glanced at me. I didn't know you knew my mother. Judith laughed. Knew her. I saw Madeline's expression change. I stepped in quickly. Judith. Something in my voice stopped her. Not here. Not like this. Judith studied me. Then she noticed the employees behind the welcome table. One of them still held the guest list. What's going on? She asked. Nothing that needs your attention. Judith frowned. I own the place. Unfortunately, almost everything eventually becomes my attention. The younger employee looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Whitmore, there was just some confusion regarding the guest list. What confusion? I shook my head slightly. Judith, please. But the second employee had already spoken. Ms. Langford's name isn't on the final list. Judith looked at her, then at me. I don't understand. It's fine. No, it isn't. Her voice remained polite, but I remembered that tone. It was the same tone Judith used decades earlier when a caterer arrived 2 hours late and tried blaming traffic. She turned toward the employee. Was she accidentally omitted? The woman hesitated. I wanted to spare Madeline, even after everything that instinct remained. Judith. I only came to deliver something. But Judith's eyes had moved to the sheet. She reached for it. The employee reluctantly handed it over. Judith scanned the page. Then she saw the crossed-out line. Her expression changed. She read the note beside it. Removed per bride request. The foyer became painfully quiet. Judith looked at Madeline, then at me. Wilma, please don't. Her eyes softened. You were removed. I held her gaze. Yes. Judith looked genuinely stunned. But you're the bride's mother. I know. The younger employee seemed desperate to disappear into the floor. Several guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. I hated that. This wasn't how I wanted Madeline's wedding weekend to begin. I stepped toward Judith. I didn't come to attend the dinner, but I brought my mother's wedding handkerchief for Madeline. That's all. Judith looked toward the box in my daughter's hands, then back at me. What happened, Judith? I'm not asking for gossip. I'm asking why one of the most important women who ever walked through these doors is being told she isn't on a list. Madeline inhaled sharply. I closed my eyes for a second. The sentence had been spoken. Not the whole truth, but enough. When I opened my eyes, Nathan had entered the foyer. He wore a dark suit without a tie and was talking to an older man. Then he saw us. Wilma. His smile appeared automatically. There you are. Madeline turned toward him. Nathan. He walked closer. I thought you were coming later. I looked at him. Apparently Madeline hadn't told him I wasn't coming at all. I was delivering something. He noticed the tension. What's going on? Nathan, nothing. Madeline said quickly. Judith looked between them. Then she looked at me. I could almost see her deciding whether to stay silent. She didn't. Apparently Wilma isn't on tonight's guest list. Nathan frowned. What? Madeline stepped toward him. It's complicated. There was that word again. Nathan looked at the paper in Judith's hand. Then at me. I don't understand. Neither do I, Judith said. Judith, I warned softly. She took a breath. Then she handed the list back to the employee. Please add Ms. Langford. Madeline's head snapped up. Mrs. Whitmore. Judith turned. It was the first time I had ever heard my daughter sound intimidated by another woman. Is there a problem? Judith asked. Madeline swallowed. We have a fixed guest count. Judith glanced toward the ballroom. I think we can locate one chair. It's not about the chair. The moment Madeline said it, she realized her mistake. Judith became very still. No, she said quietly. I suspect it isn't. I stepped between them before the situation became uglier. Don't add me. Judith looked at me. Wilma, I mean it. You're not leaving. I came to deliver the handkerchief. And you have. Yes. Then stay. I shook my head. I don't want a chair someone has to force my daughter to give me. Madeline flinched. Nathan stared at her. I could see questions forming in his face. Questions Madeline clearly wasn't ready to answer. Judith reached for my hand. You always were stubborn. So were you. I had to be. So did I. For a moment, the old friendship stood between us. Then Judith smiled sadly. Some things don't change. No. She squeezed my hand. But one thing will. What? She turned toward the employees, then toward Madeline and Nathan. Her voice was calm. Wilma Langford never needs an invitation to walk through these doors. Nobody spoke. I felt my throat tighten. Madeline looked from Judith to me. She didn't understand. Neither did Nathan. Diane had appeared near the ballroom entrance, now drawn by the silence. What does that mean? Madeline asked. Judith looked almost offended by the question. What does it mean? Yes. Judith turned to me. You never told her. I shook my head. There was nothing to tell. Judith gave a short, disbelieving laugh. Nothing. It was a long time ago. A long time ago doesn't make it nothing. Madeline stepped closer. Mom, what is she talking about? I looked at my daughter. Hours earlier, she had watched employees search a guest list for my name. Now she was searching my face for an explanation. I used to work here, I said. Madeline frowned. At Whitmore Estate, before it looked like this. How long? A long time. Judith shook her head. She didn't just work here. I looked at her. Judith. No, Wilma. Her eyes were wet now. I'm 71 years old. I have spent half my life watching people take photographs in front of these walls. I will not stand here and listen to you pretend you were simply another employee. The foyer had become completely silent. Madeline's face changed. Diane moved closer. Nathan didn't take his eyes off me. I suddenly felt exposed in a way I hadn't expected, not because I was ashamed, because the things Judith was about to describe had never felt like achievements I needed to display. They were simply part of my life, part of Robert's life, part of a difficult time when several people worked hard, because failure wasn't an abstract possibility. It meant losing homes, losing savings, losing dreams. Madeline looked at Judith. What did my mother do? Judith didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to one of the tall windows overlooking the gardens. Do you see all this? Madeline followed her gaze. The manicured lawns, the stone terrace, the white chairs arranged for tomorrow's ceremony. Yes. When your mother first came here, almost none of it existed. Madeline looked at me. I said nothing. Judith continued. The West Ballroom wasn't a ballroom. The carriage house roof leaked. We had debt coming from every direction, and my husband and I were months away from losing the property. My daughter's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Judith looked at me, and then Wilma showed up. I remembered that day, 34 years earlier. I had been carrying a clipboard and wearing shoes that hurt my feet. Judith had been 37 and furious because another event planner had told her no serious bride would book a wedding at a half-renovated estate. I had disagreed. Not because the place was beautiful, it wasn't. But I could see what it could become. Madeline's voice pulled me back. What happened? Judith smiled at me. Your mother happened. I lowered my eyes. Judith, you don't owe anyone this story. Yes, she said. I do. Then she looked directly at Madeline, especially tonight. I knew then there was no stopping her. The truth I had kept quietly in the past was about to enter my daughter's wedding weekend. And standing there with my name crossed off a piece of paper, I understood the irony. Madeline had spent weeks trying to make sure I wouldn't embarrass her at Whitmore Estate. She had no idea that long before she dreamed of getting married there, I had helped keep those doors open. Judith looked around the foyer as if the polished floors and crystal fixtures had suddenly become transparent. When Wilma first came here, she said there was nothing elegant about Whitmore Estate. I almost smiled. That was certainly true. Judith pointed toward the tall windows overlooking the gardens. That lawn was mostly weeds. The irrigation system didn't work. The west wing had water damage and the carriage house roof leaked so badly that we kept buckets inside whenever it rained. Nathan glanced toward me. Madeline didn't move. Judith continued. My husband Charles and I bought the property because we had a dream and very little common sense. I laughed softly. You said it, not me. Judith smiled. Wilma used stronger language. I probably did. For a brief moment, we were young women again. Then Judith's expression grew serious. We thought people would see what we saw. A beautiful old estate where families could celebrate weddings and anniversaries. She paused. They didn't. The room had grown quiet enough that I could hear faint music from the ballroom. For almost 2 years we lost money, Judith said. Every repair uncovered another repair. Every event cost more than we expected. We had borrowed against almost everything we owned. I remembered those days vividly. Judith sitting behind an old desk covered with unpaid invoices. Charles trying to repair a window himself because hiring someone cost too much. The smell of damp plaster after thunderstorms. And then Wilma came to look at the property for a client, Judith said. Madeline finally spoke. You were already an event coordinator. I nodded. For several years. But you never told me you worked here. I didn't exactly work for Whitmore. Judith laughed. That is technically true and completely misleading. I gave her a look. She ignored it. Wilma's client didn't book us that day, Judith continued. The place wasn't ready. I knew it. Wilma knew it. You cried anyway, I reminded her. In the parking lot, beside my car. I was having a difficult year. You threatened to sell the estate and move to Florida. Judith smiled. And your mother told me Florida already had enough dramatic women. Nathan laughed. Even Diane smiled. Madeline did not. She was watching me as if trying to reconcile two different women, the mother she knew, and whoever Judith was describing. What happened after that? Nathan asked. Judith looked at me. Wilma came back. I remembered. 3 days after that first visit, I had driven back to Whitmore with a legal pad filled with ideas. I told Judith the property wasn't the problem, I said. What was? Madeline asked. Everything around it. Judith nodded. We had no proper vendor relationships, no reliable caterers, no preferred florist. Our pricing made no sense. We didn't have procedures for weather emergencies or guest flow. You didn't have enough bathrooms, I added. Judith laughed. That too. I shrugged. I gave her suggestions. Judith stared at me. Suggestions, I knew that expression. Don't exaggerate. I am 71. I have earned the right to exaggerate. Then she turned back to Madeline. Your mother spent months helping us. Madeline frowned. Why? I answered before Judith could. Because I liked the place. Judith shook her head. She believed in it. I looked toward the gardens. I could see what it might become. That was the truth. Even when Whitmore Estate looked exhausted, it had something. The old trees, the brickwork, the way evening light fell across the western field. I could imagine music there, families, photographs, memories. Judith continued. Wilma started recommending us to clients who were willing to take a chance. The first few were small events, I said. Small events kept the electricity on. Then came the wedding I still remembered clearly. A bride named Rebecca wanted an outdoor ceremony, but had a limited budget. I convinced her to visit Whitmore. She loved it. We spent 6 weeks preparing. The morning of the wedding it rained. Hard. Everything went wrong, Judith said. The florist was late, I remembered. The caterer brought the wrong linens. The power went out in half the carriage house. And a pipe burst, Judith added. I smiled. That was Robert's moment. Madeline's face changed. Dad. Yes. You brought Dad here. He came because I called him in a panic. Robert arrived in his work truck wearing muddy boots and repaired the pipe while I moved the ceremony indoors. He refused payment, Judith said. That sounds like him, Nathan said. My throat tightened. It does. Judith's eyes softened. We pulled that wedding together. Rebecca was thrilled. Her family told everyone. Then another bride called, I said. And another, and another. Judith nodded. Wilma helped us build relationships with vendors. She taught me how to price events properly. She created checklists we used for years. I stole those from other planners. You improved them. I smiled. That sounds better. But Judith wasn't finished. Eventually, Whitmore started growing. She looked around. Not like this. That took decades, but enough that we thought we might survive. Her voice changed. Then Charles got sick. I remembered that part too. He had needed surgery. Insurance covered some costs, but not enough. At the same time, a bank payment came due. Judith had called me late one night. She was crying. I was going to lose this place, she said now. Madeline looked at her. Lose it. Judith nodded. We were behind. I had payroll coming. 2 events were already booked, and if we closed, I would have owed deposits I couldn't repay. I felt uncomfortable. I knew where the story was going. Judith. No. She turned to me. You've spent your whole life acting as though helping people doesn't count if you don't announce it afterward. It doesn't need announcing. Tonight it does. She faced Madeline again. Your mother and father loaned us money. Madeline stared at me. What? It wasn't a fortune, I said quickly. At the time, it was a fortune to you. That's dramatic. It was part of your savings. Nathan looked stunned. How much? That isn't important. And I meant it. Robert and I had discussed it for 3 nights. We had been saving toward a larger house. Instead, we stayed in our little brick one. I never regretted it. Judith's business recovered. She repaid every dollar with interest years later. I made that clear. It was a loan, I said. Judith paid us back completely. Judith nodded. Every cent. Diane finally spoke. But without that loan, Judith looked around the foyer. There might not be a Whitmore Estate. Silence. I immediately shook my head. That's too much. It isn't. You and Charles did the work. With help. We all had help. Judith smiled sadly. That is exactly what Wilma always says. I looked at Madeline. She had tears in her eyes. But I didn't feel victorious. That surprised me. For weeks, some wounded part of me had wanted my daughter to understand that being ordinary wasn't the same as being insignificant. Now she was learning it in the most dramatic way possible, and I wished she weren't. Because I didn't want Madeline to respect me, because Judith Whitmore told her I deserved respect. I wanted my daughter to respect the woman who sewed her dresses, the woman who packed her school lunches, the woman married to a plumber, the woman who lived in the modest brick house. That woman should have been enough. Judith touched my arm. Do you remember what you told me when I tried to repay you early? I smiled. I probably told you not to be stupid. You said build the business first. Pride doesn't pay invoices. Nathan smiled. That sounds like Wilma. Madeline looked at him. You knew she was like this. Nathan seemed confused. Like what, all of this? He shook his head. No. But I knew your mother was capable. The simplicity of his answer struck me. He had never needed a story about Whitmore Estate to decide I mattered. Judith looked toward Madeline. I'm going to tell you something about your mother. I sighed. Apparently you're telling everyone everything. She ignored me. For years, whenever people complimented me on what this place became, I thought about the people who helped when there was nothing impressive here. Her voice softened. Wilma was one of them. Madeline looked at me. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about the question. Because there had never seemed to be a reason. Because raising her had mattered more to me than telling her about old business accomplishments. Because after Robert died, those memories belonged to a version of my life I rarely visited. Because it wasn't a secret, I said. She frowned. That doesn't make sense. It was simply something that happened before you were old enough to remember. But Whitmore Estate is a building. Judith gasped theatrically. A beautiful building. I smiled. A very beautiful building. Then I looked at Madeline again. But it never occurred to me that you needed to know what I had done here in order to decide whether I was good enough to walk through the door. Her face crumpled. That was the moment the truth finally reached her. Not the loan, not my work, not Judith's gratitude, the meaning behind all of it. Madeline had spent weeks worrying that I wasn't sophisticated enough for Whitmore Estate. She had changed my clothes, corrected my stories, hidden my background. Finally, she had removed my name. And now the owner of the place was standing beside me explaining that long before the chandeliers and landscaped gardens, my hands had helped build part of what Madeline considered so impressive. Judith squeezed my hand. I meant what I said earlier. I looked at her. You will never need an invitation here. My eyes filled. Thank you. Then I looked at my daughter. Madeline stood with her grandmother's handkerchief clutched against her chest. For the first time all evening, she seemed to have no concern about who was watching. She looked ashamed. But strangely, that didn't make me feel better. Because the saddest realization of the night wasn't that Madeline had underestimated me. It was that she had needed a wealthy woman in an elegant venue to explain the value of the mother who had loved her all her life. For several seconds after Judith finished speaking, nobody seemed to know what to do. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to begin in less than 20 minutes. Staff moved quietly through the ballroom beyond us. Glasses were being filled, candles were being lit. Somewhere near the terrace, a violinist was warming up, yet the foyer felt frozen. Then Diane Caldwell stepped forward. Wilma, she said softly. I turned toward her. For once, Diane looked uncertain. I owe you an apology. I wasn't expecting that. For what? She glanced toward Madeline before looking back at me. I think I made comments over the past few months that may have contributed to all this. Madeline immediately shook her head. Diane, you didn't. Diane raised one hand. Let me finish. Her voice wasn't harsh. I talk too much about appearances, about presentation, about the right venue, the right clothes, the right people. She gave a small, embarrassed smile. I've spent too many years in rooms where people pretend those things matter more than they do. I appreciated the honesty, but I also knew where responsibility belonged. Madeline made her own decision, I said. My daughter looked down. Diane nodded. I understand. That mattered. She wasn't trying to take the blame away from Madeline. I just want you to know, Diane continued. I never asked her to exclude you. I know. She looked surprised. How? Because I started paying attention. I glanced toward Nathan. He never asked her to change me either. Nathan shook his head. Of course not. Madeline closed her eyes. Every excuse she had built was disappearing. Not because anyone was attacking her, because the truth was standing in the room. Judith touched my arm. Come inside. I looked toward the ballroom. No. Wilma. I mean it. There are people in there who would love to meet you. That almost made me laugh. An hour earlier, those same people had been part of the reason my daughter didn't want me there. Now that Judith had told them I once mattered to Whitmore Estate, suddenly I was interesting. I don't want to be tonight's attraction. Judith sighed. You haven't changed. Neither have you, unfortunately. A couple standing nearby approached us. The woman smiled at Judith. I'm sorry to interrupt, but did I hear correctly? Ms. Langford helped you when the estate first opened. I felt Madeline stiffen beside me. Judith smiled. She certainly did. The woman turned to me. That's extraordinary. Not really. It sounds extraordinary. It was mostly paperwork, phone calls, and bad coffee. Judith laughed. And preventing me from quitting twice a week. Another guest joined the conversation. Then another. Within minutes, people who had barely noticed me when I stood beside the guest list were asking questions. How long had I worked in events? What was Whitmore like in the early years? Had I really helped organize the first weddings? I answered politely. But every compliment made me more uncomfortable. Not because I disliked them, because I could feel Madeline watching. This was exactly the kind of social approval she had been chasing. And now it was being handed to me. The irony felt cruel. I looked at my daughter. She stood alone near the staircase, still holding my mother's wooden box. Her face looked smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally. For the first time that evening, I felt sorry for her. Then Nathan walked toward her. I couldn't hear his first words, but I saw Madeline's shoulders tense. He said something else. She shook her head. Nathan glanced toward me, then back at her. Their conversation became more serious. I excused myself from the guests. I need some air. Judith started to follow. I'm fine. You've said that twice today. I learned from my daughter. Judith gave me a sad smile. I walked toward the terrace. The evening air felt cool against my face. From there, I could see the ceremony chairs arranged across the lawn for the next day. Rows of white chairs faced an arch covered with greenery. I imagined Madeline walking between them. For 39 years, I had pictured that moment in different forms. When she was little, she once wrapped herself in my bedroom curtain and announced she was getting married to the boy next door. Robert refused to attend the ceremony because the groom had previously stolen his newspaper. I smiled. Then the terrace door opened. Nathan stepped outside. Wilma. I turned. He looked upset. Not angry in the explosive way some men become angry. Nathan looked hurt. Can I ask you something? Yes. Did you decide not to attend tonight? I knew immediately what had happened. No. His jaw tightened. Madeline told me you had. I said nothing. She told me you were tired, he continued. She said the wedding weekend was becoming too much and you wanted to rest tonight. My heart sank. Not because Madeline had lied about me. I already knew she was capable of that, because Nathan was discovering it hours before he was supposed to marry her. I didn't want you involved, I said. But I am involved. I know. Why didn't you tell me? Because she's my daughter. He looked toward the ballroom. And she's going to be my wife. There was no accusation in his voice. Just truth. I thought she would tell you herself. She didn't. I looked down at the gardens. I'm sorry. Nathan shook his head. You have nothing to apologize for. Behind us. The door opened again. Madeline stepped onto the terrace. Nathan. He turned. Her eyes were red. Can we talk privately? We were. She looked at me. I started toward the door. Nathan stopped me. No, Wilma, please stay. Madeline looked frightened. Nathan, this is between us. It stopped being between us when you lied to me about your mother. Her face crumpled. I was going to explain. When after the wedding. Nathan stared at her. After I married you, I didn't want this becoming a bigger issue. You removed your mother from our rehearsal dinner. Our rehearsal dinner. He repeated the phrase. Yes, ours. Madeline wiped her face. I panicked. So you lied. I knew you wouldn't agree. That sentence hurt him. I saw it immediately. Nathan became very still. You knew I wouldn't agree, so you made sure I didn't know. Madeline didn't answer. He looked away. I wanted to disappear. This was their relationship, their wedding. I didn't want my pain becoming a weapon between them. Nathan, I said your wedding is tomorrow. He looked at me. I know. Then don't make decisions tonight while everyone is emotional. Madeline looked at me with surprise. Even now I was protecting her. Maybe mothers never completely stop. Nathan rubbed his forehead. I need some time. He walked toward the far end of the terrace. Madeline started after him, then stopped. She turned to me. Mom. I looked at the wooden box still in her hands. I walked toward her. Open it. She blinked. What the box? Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay my mother's handkerchief. Madeline touched the embroidery. Grandma Eleanor carried that when she married your grandfather. I remember. I carried it when I married your father. Madeline looked at me. You told me. Yes. I lifted the handkerchief carefully. You asked me to bring this because you wanted something from the women who came before you. Tears filled her eyes. I did. I placed it in her palm. Then remember, those women were real people, Madeline, not decorations. She began crying. I'm sorry. I closed her fingers around the handkerchief. I hope someday those words mean what they need to mean. They do, not yet. That hurt her, but it was true. I looked toward Nathan, then back at her. You need to talk to the man you're marrying. What about us? We need to talk too. When not tonight. Panic crossed her face. Are you coming tomorrow? I didn't answer. Mom, please. I don't know. She stared at me. I leaned forward and kissed her forehead. I kept my promise. I brought the handkerchief. Then I turned toward the doors. Judith was waiting inside. You're leaving? She asked. Yes, you could stay. I know. That was the difference now. I wasn't leaving because someone had removed me. I was leaving because I chose to. Judith hugged me. Call me. I will. You said that 25 years ago. I was busy. For 25 years, very busy. She laughed through tears. Then she whispered Robert would be proud of you. That nearly broke me. I squeezed her hand. Thank you. I walked toward the entrance. The same employees who had searched the guest list earlier watched me approach. The younger woman stepped forward. Ms. Langford. Yes. She smiled. Have a good evening. I smiled back. You too. No one checked a list this time. Outside, I reached my car and looked back at Whitmore Estate. Through the tall windows, I could see Madeline standing beside Nathan. They weren't arguing. They were talking. Really talking, perhaps for the first time in weeks. I hoped they would find their way through it. But I also understood something I hadn't understood before. My daughter's wedding was not more important than my dignity. I didn't need Judith's history lesson to prove my worth. I didn't need strangers asking about my career. And I didn't need a chair at a beautiful table badly enough to pretend my daughter hadn't deliberately removed me from it. For the first time since the wedding planning began, the decision about what happened next belonged entirely to me. And Madeline had no idea whether the front row seat waiting for her mother the next morning would remain empty. I drove home from Whitmore Estate with the radio turned off. Usually, silence in the car made me uncomfortable. Robert had been the kind of man who filled every drive with conversation, even if the conversation was about potholes or whether somebody needed to trim the trees along the highway. After he died, I kept the radio on almost constantly. That night, I needed quiet. I had traveled only a few miles when headlights appeared behind me. At first, I didn't pay attention. Then the car stayed close through 2 turns. When I stopped at a red light, I recognized Madeline's car in my rearview mirror. I sighed. Of course. I continued driving. She followed me all the way home. When I pulled into my driveway, she parked behind me. I remained inside my car for a moment before getting out. Madeline was already walking toward me. Mom, you should be at your rehearsal dinner. I couldn't stay there. That was your decision. So was leaving. I looked at her. She had changed. Not physically. The polished bride I had seen inside Whitmore Estate seemed gone. Her shoulders were slumped. Her makeup was smudged. She looked exhausted. Where's Nathan? At the estate. Then you should probably be with him. He said he needed space. I nodded. That sounds reasonable. Madeline flinched. Can I come inside? I hesitated. Then I unlocked the door. We entered the house without speaking. I turned on the kitchen light. Madeline stood near the table where only days earlier the wooden box had rested. Now she held it against her chest. You brought it back. She looked down. I didn't want to leave Grandma's handkerchief there. Why, I don't know. I took off my coat. Would you like coffee? She almost laughed. How can you offer me coffee right now because you're in my house? That answer seemed to hurt her. I filled the kettle. Madeline sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had done homework. The same table where Robert had helped her fill out college applications. The same table where she had once announced she was moving into her first apartment and cried 10 minutes later because she was terrified. I made 2 cups of coffee. When I sat down, Madeline wrapped both hands around hers. I'm sorry. I looked at her. She waited. When I didn't answer, she continued. I mean it. For what? She blinked. For everything. That's not specific enough. Her face tightened. Mom, if you want to apologize, tell me what you're apologizing for. She looked down. For removing you. Why was that wrong? Because you're my mother. That isn't enough either. She pushed her chair back slightly. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything for me. I kept my voice calm. I want you to understand it. I do understand. Do you? Yes. Then why are you here? She stared at me. Because I hurt you. Is that why her expression changed? What do you mean? I folded my hands. You've mentioned Nathan twice since we walked through the door. She became defensive. Because he's upset. I know. And Diane feels terrible. I know. Everybody at the dinner knows what happened. There it is. What the problem? Madeline stared at me. You're embarrassed. No. You're afraid people are talking. That isn't fair. Maybe not. So tell me I'm wrong. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I felt tired rather than angry. Madeline, are you sorry because you hurt me? Or because what you did became visible? Tears filled her eyes. I don't know. For the first time that night, I believed her. At least it was honest. I nodded. That's something. She wiped her face. I didn't think it would happen like this. How did you think it would happen? You'd bring the handkerchief, you'd go home, then tomorrow we'd have the wedding, and I would smile for photographs. She lowered her eyes. Yes. As though Friday never happened. I thought we could talk afterward. After you got what you needed from me. That sounds horrible. It feels horrible. She covered her mouth. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Madeline whispered, when Judith started telling everyone about you, I wanted to disappear. I looked at her. Because you were embarrassed by me again. No. She shook her head. Because I realized how stupid I had been. I waited. She was talking about you like you were this incredible woman. I felt irritation rise. That is exactly the problem. Madeline looked confused. What Judith shouldn't have to tell you I'm incredible. I didn't mean I was your mother before I was anything to Whitmore Estate. I know. No. Listen. I leaned forward. I changed your diapers. I sat beside your bed when you had pneumonia. Your father and I worked overtime so you could go to college without crushing debt. I answered the phone at 2 in the morning when your first serious relationship ended. Madeline began crying. I remember. I made mistakes too. Plenty. But none of what Judith said tonight should have been necessary for you to decide I was worthy of sitting beside you. It wasn't. Then why wasn't my name on that list? She had no answer. I continued. If I had never helped Judith, would removing me have been acceptable? No. If I had spent my entire life sewing clothes and making casseroles, would I have deserved less respect? No. If your father had only ever been a plumber, would that have made him less of a man? No. Her voice broke. Then understand why tonight didn't make me feel victorious. Madeline stared at me through tears. I thought you'd be happy that everyone knew. Knew what that you mattered. I shook my head. I already knew I mattered. The room went quiet. Madeline looked almost stunned. I continued softly. I don't need strangers to discover my value. I needed my daughter not to forget it. She covered her face. I let her cry. I didn't rush around the table. I didn't tell her everything was fine, because everything wasn't fine. After a while, she whispered, Nathan asked whether he really knows me. That hurt to hear. What did you say? I told him I didn't know. I sighed. He loves you. I know. But love doesn't mean he isn't allowed to question what happened. I know. She wiped her eyes. He said the part that scared him wasn't even what I did to you. What was it that I knew he would disagree, so I lied? I nodded. Nathan had understood the deeper problem. Madeline looked at me. What if he calls off the wedding? There it was. The question underneath everything. I reached across the table and touched her hand. I hope he doesn't. She began crying harder. But if he does, that will be between you and Nathan. Can't you talk to him? No. Her head snapped up. Mom, he respects you. That's exactly why I won't. Please, no. Just tell him I made a mistake. He already knows you made a mistake. Tell him I'm not a terrible person. I don't think you're a terrible person. Then tell him. I shook my head. You have to show him. She pulled her hand away. So you're just going to let my wedding fall apart? I stared at her. The words hung between us. Madeline heard them too. She closed her eyes. Oh God. I stood. This is what I mean. I'm sorry. Even now, some part of you is asking me to fix the consequences. I didn't mean it like that. I know, and I did. That was the tragedy. Madeline wasn't evil. She wasn't heartless. She was frightened, insecure, and accustomed to believing I would always absorb the damage. I can't repair this for you, I said. She looked up. But I can still love you while you repair it yourself. She cried quietly. After several minutes, she asked the question I knew was coming. Are you coming tomorrow? I walked toward the window. My blue mother of the bride dress was hanging upstairs. I had looked at it before leaving for Whitmore. At the time, I had imagined wearing it while watching my daughter marry. Now everything felt uncertain. I don't know. Madeline stood. Mom, please. I turned. If I say yes because you're crying, nothing changes. I want you there. Tonight you wanted me gone. That was before. Before Judith recognized me. Madeline recoiled. No. Then don't ask me tonight. She looked terrified. What am I supposed to do? Go back. To Whitmore. Yes, everyone knows. Then let them know. She stared at me. Talk to Nathan. Tell him the truth without excuses. Talk to Diane if you need to. Finish your rehearsal dinner or don't. But stop making decisions based on how everything looks. Her eyes dropped. And you? I'm going upstairs. To sleep? To try. She moved toward the door. Before leaving, she turned. Mom. Yes, I really am sorry. I looked at my daughter. I believe you're beginning to be. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was the first honest thing I could give her. After she left, I climbed the stairs. My blue dress hung on the closet door. The champagne dress remained folded in its box. I stood looking at both. Tomorrow morning, one of them might go to Whitmore Estate. Or neither would. For the first time in my life, I was allowing my daughter to face the possibility that loving me did not guarantee access to me after she had treated me carelessly. I still loved her. That had never changed. But love and permission were not the same thing. And before I sat in that front row seat, I needed to know whether Madeline wanted her mother there because she finally understood what she had done, or because an empty chair would embarrass her even more. I barely slept. At 6:15 the next morning, sunlight slipped through my bedroom curtains and landed across the blue dress hanging from my closet door. I stared at it from bed. For weeks that dress had represented a simple decision. What would I wear to my daughter's wedding? Now it represented something much harder. Would I go at all? I got up, made coffee, and carried my cup to the back porch. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere nearby, a sprinkler clicked steadily across a lawn. I imagined Whitmore Estate already waking up. Florists arriving, tables being checked, photographers organizing equipment. Madeline sitting in the bridal suite while someone worked on her hair. For 39 years, I had imagined being beside her that morning. I thought I would fasten her necklace, tell her she looked beautiful, probably cry before she did. Instead, I was sitting alone in my robe drinking coffee. My phone was on the table. No messages. I was relieved and disappointed. At 7:20, I heard a knock at the front door. Not the doorbell. 3 soft knocks. I knew who it was before I stood. When I opened the door, Madeline was there. She was wearing jeans, sneakers, and an old gray sweatshirt. No makeup. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail. For the first time in months, she looked nothing like the carefully polished woman who had been planning the wedding. She looked like my daughter. Hi, she said. Hi. I know it's early. It is. I can leave. I stepped aside. Come in. She entered carrying a folded piece of paper. No wooden box. No wedding binder. No phone in her hand. We went to the kitchen. Coffee, I asked. She nodded. I poured her a cup. She took it black. That surprised me. Madeline normally added enough cream to make coffee stop resembling coffee. She sat at the table. I sat across from her. How's Nathan? She looked into her cup. He's still marrying me. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I'm glad. We talked until almost 2. That's good. It wasn't pleasant. Good conversations aren't always pleasant. She nodded. Hy told me he needed to know whether I understood why I lied. And do you, I think so? She placed the folded paper on the table. I recognized it immediately. The original guest list. She opened it. My name appeared near the middle. Wilma Langford. A line ran through it. Madeline touched the crossed-out name. I did this. Yes, I know that sounds obvious. It does. She gave a weak smile. But yesterday I kept saying I panicked, or that I was under pressure, or that I thought people would judge me. She looked at me. Those things were true, but they weren't the whole truth. I waited. Madeline took a long breath. I've been ashamed of where I came from for a long time. There was no defense in her voice, no qualification, just confession. When did that start? I don't know exactly. She thought for a moment. Maybe middle school. That surprised me. You never said anything. I didn't know how. She looked toward the kitchen window. Do you remember my friend Caroline Mercer? Yes. Caroline had lived in a large house on the other side of Richmond. Her parents had everything: pool, vacation house, new cars. I remember. I used to hate when you picked me up from her house. My chest tightened. Because of the station wagon. She nodded. Dad's green one. The passenger door didn't open. I remember climbing over the driver's seat. Despite myself, I smiled. So did I. Madeline's eyes filled. I was embarrassed. I wish you'd told me. What would you have done? Probably told your father to fix the door. She laughed through tears. He would have said he was going to. For another 2 years. We both laughed. Then the sadness returned. Madeline looked at the guest list. I compared us to everyone. Our house. Yes. My clothes. Yes. Your clothes. She nodded. The dresses you made. That hurt. Not because she had disliked them, because I remembered staying awake after she went to bed finishing hems beneath the kitchen light. I thought everybody could tell we didn't have as much money. Some probably could. I know that now. She wiped her eyes. But back then it felt like being exposed. And when did Nathan's family bring that back the first time I went to Diane's house? I listened. Everything was beautiful. She knew people who talked about Europe like it was a weekend trip. Everyone asked where I went to school, where my family vacationed, what my parents did. Did they insult you? No. Did Diane know? There it was. The truth we had both been approaching. Nobody did this to you. Madeline shook her head. No. She began crying. I did it to myself. I reached for a napkin and handed it to her. She continued. The closer the wedding got, the worse it became. I started thinking that if everything looked right, nobody would notice I felt like I didn't belong. The venue. Yes. The expensive details. Yes. My dress. She nodded. Your purse. Your hair. The stories. And eventually me. Madeline looked at the line through my name. Yes. Her voice broke. I thought if you weren't at the rehearsal dinner, I could control what people knew about me. I felt tears in my own eyes. And yesterday Judith told them anyway. No. Madeline shook her head. That's what I misunderstood at first. I waited. Judith didn't expose something shameful. She showed me how ridiculous my shame was. I said nothing. Madeline folded her hands. Last night Nathan asked me something. What he asked, whether I would have been ashamed of you if Judith had never recognized you. That was the question I had been asking too. What did you say? I said I didn't know. She looked directly at me, and then I realized that was the ugliest answer I could give. I felt my throat tighten. Mom, you shouldn't have needed a successful career. You shouldn't have needed to help save Whitmore Estate. You shouldn't have needed Judith Whitmore to tell everyone you were important. A tear slipped down her cheek. You should have been enough because you were my mother. I looked away. That sentence reached the place all her previous apologies had missed. Madeline continued. You were right last night. I wanted Grandma's handkerchief because it made my wedding feel meaningful. She swallowed. But I was treating the people behind that meaning like they were inconvenient. I wiped my eyes. I don't expect you to forgive me today. I looked back at her. I don't expect you to come. That surprised me. She pushed the guest list toward me. I came because I needed to tell you the truth before I got married. No photographer, no. No Nathan, no Diane, no why, because I didn't want an audience. For the first time, I believed her apology belonged entirely to me. She stood. I should go. I glanced at the clock. You should. She walked toward the doorway. Madeline. She turned. What happened to the handkerchief? Her expression softened. It's at Whitmore. Good. I'm carrying it. I nodded. Your grandmother would like that. Madeline smiled sadly. Then she looked toward the staircase. She knew my dress was upstairs, but she didn't ask. Instead, she said, If you decide not to come, I'll understand. I studied her. That doesn't mean it won't hurt. I know. And I won't pretend it doesn't. And I don't want you to. She opened the front door. Before stepping outside, she turned. One more thing. Yes, I'm not ashamed of that house anymore. I looked around my little brick home. You shouldn't be. I know. She smiled. Then she left. I watched her drive away. For several minutes I remained at the door. Then I went upstairs. The champagne dress was still inside its box. I opened it. The beads caught the morning light. Beautiful. Expensive. Perfect for the woman Madeline had wanted me to pretend to be. I closed the box. Then I looked at the blue dress. The one I had chosen. The one Madeline had said didn't fit Whitmore Estate. I touched the fabric. For the first time since the rehearsal dinner, I allowed myself to imagine walking into that venue again, not because Judith had declared that I belonged there, not because Madeline had apologized, not because an empty chair might embarrass anyone, because my daughter had finally done something I had been waiting weeks for her to do. She had stopped asking me to make her comfortable. She had told the truth. Whether that truth was enough to bring me to her wedding, I still hadn't decided. But I took the blue dress from the closet door and laid it carefully across my bed. By 11 o'clock, I had made my decision. I showered, dried my hair, and stood in front of the bedroom mirror wearing the blue dress. My blue dress. Not the champagne one Madeline had bought. Not something selected to impress Diane's friends. Not something chosen because it photographed well beneath the chandeliers at Whitmore Estate. The dress I had chosen before anyone convinced me there was something wrong with being myself. I fastened my earrings, the inexpensive pair Diane had complimented at brunch. Then I picked up my brown leather purse, Robert's anniversary gift. I looked at my reflection. Well, I whispered, "This is what they're getting." I could almost hear Robert laughing. The ceremony was scheduled for 2. Whitmore Estate was roughly 40 minutes away. At 12:15, I was still standing in my kitchen. Going to the wedding did not erase what Madeline had done. That mattered. I didn't want my presence to become a shortcut around accountability. But I kept thinking about the woman who had sat at my kitchen table that morning. Madeline had finally stopped defending herself. She had stopped blaming Diane, stopped blaming the guest count, stopped blaming pressure. She had looked at the line through my name and admitted that she had drawn it because she was ashamed of where she came from. It was ugly. But it was true. And truth, I had learned, is often where healing begins. At 12:20, I picked up my car keys. The drive to Whitmore Estate felt different this time. The previous afternoon I had gone there to deliver something. Today I was going because I chose to witness my daughter's marriage. I wasn't going because Judith had told me I belonged. I wasn't going because Nathan expected me. And I certainly wasn't going because Madeline's photographs needed a mother in them. I was going because my daughter had finally spoken to me as one imperfect woman to another. That didn't repair everything, but it opened a door. When I reached the estate, the parking area was nearly full. I checked the dashboard clock. 1:47. 13 minutes. Cutting it close, Wilma. Robert would have hated that. The man believed arriving 10 minutes early meant you were already 5 minutes late. I parked near the far end. As I walked toward the main building, I heard music drifting from the ceremony lawn. Guests were already seated. I stopped near the entrance. For one strange moment, the previous afternoon returned. The welcome table, the list, my crossed-out name, Madeline standing silently in the distance. I could have turned around. Instead, I opened the door. The young employee from yesterday was standing inside. She recognized me immediately. Her face brightened. "Ms. Langford, good afternoon. We've been hoping you'd come." I smiled. "Who's we?" She looked embarrassed. "Pretty much everybody." I laughed softly. I was afraid of that. She stepped away from the desk. "You don't need to check in. I was hoping my criminal record had cleared overnight." She laughed. Then her expression softened. "The ceremony is about to start. I know. I can take you around the side. Thank you." We walked through a hallway and out toward the lawn. The scene was beautiful. White chairs formed 2 long sections beneath enormous oak trees. Flowers lined the aisle. At the far end, Nathan stood beneath an arch of greenery. And there in the front row, one chair was empty. Mine. My steps slowed. Nathan noticed me first. His expression changed. He smiled. Not a polite smile. relief. Then Diane saw me. She placed one hand against her chest. The guests nearest her turned. A quiet ripple moved through the first few rows. I immediately wished everyone would stop looking. Then Judith appeared beside the aisle. She wore a deep green dress. She looked at me from head to toe. That dress. I raised an eyebrow. What about it? It's perfect. I smiled. I know. She offered her arm. You don't need to escort me. I know. Then why are you? Because I want to. I took her arm. Together we walked toward the front. I could feel people watching. Yesterday that attention would have humiliated me. Today it simply passed around me. I didn't need their approval. I had finally remembered that. Judith stopped beside the empty chair. Diane stood. Wilma. Diane. She hugged me. I'm glad you're here. So am I. And to my surprise, I meant it. I sat. Judith squeezed my shoulder before taking her own seat. Then the music changed. Everyone stood. The bridesmaids began walking down the aisle. I felt my heart pounding. One by one, they passed. Then the music softened. The doors at the end of the lawn opened. Madeline appeared. My daughter. For a moment, I forgot everything else. She wore a simple ivory gown. Her hair was pinned back. In one hand, she held her bouquet. Wrapped around the stems was my mother's handkerchief. I covered my mouth. Madeline took her first step. Then another. Halfway down the aisle, she saw me. She stopped. Only for a second. But I saw everything move across her face. Surprise. Relief. Grief. Love. Her lips trembled. I nodded. Keep going. She did. When Madeline reached the front row, she was supposed to continue toward Nathan. Instead, she stopped beside me. The guests became completely quiet. She looked down. Mom. I stood. Her eyes filled. You came. Yes. I wasn't sure. Neither was I. A tiny laugh escaped her through the tears. Then she whispered, I'm sorry. I reached for her hand. I know. Not because everyone knows. I know. Not because Nathan got angry. I know. Because I hurt you. That was the sentence I had needed. I squeezed her hand. We'll talk about everything later. She nodded. Okay. Today go marry that man before he changes his mind. Nathan laughed from beneath the arch. Several guests laughed too. The tension broke. Madeline leaned forward and kissed my cheek. As she stepped away, I saw the handkerchief again. My mother's initials were visible against the bouquet. EM. 3 generations of women. None perfect. All connected. Madeline continued down the aisle. Nathan took her hand. I sat beside Diane. She handed me a tissue. I came prepared. I smiled. Smart woman. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about partnership honesty, patience, and choosing each other, even when choosing each other was difficult. Those words felt heavier than they normally would at a wedding. When Nathan said his vows, he looked directly at Madeline. There was love in his face, but also seriousness. They had work ahead of them. I was glad. A marriage shouldn't begin with the illusion that love prevents people from hurting each other. Love only gives them a reason to repair what they damage. When Madeline said her vows, her voice shook. She promised honesty. Nathan squeezed her hands. I knew that promise meant more to both of them after the night before. Then they exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Everyone stood and applauded. I cried. Of course I did. Robert should have been beside me. That absence suddenly felt enormous. I imagined him complaining about the uncomfortable chair while secretly crying harder than anyone. I wish you could see her, I whispered. Diane heard me. Her father. I nodded. She touched my arm. I think he would be proud. I looked at Madeline. So do I. After the ceremony, Madeline and Nathan walked back down the aisle together. When they passed me, Madeline reached out. Her fingers brushed mine. Just once. No speech, no performance, no dramatic announcement. Only a daughter reaching for her mother. I reached back. That small gesture didn't erase the crossed-out name. It didn't erase the empty place at the rehearsal dinner. Forgiveness wasn't a magic trick. The wound was still there. but for the first time I could imagine it becoming a scar instead of remaining an open cut. Later, as guests moved toward cocktail hour, Judith approached me. So she said, "Apparently your blue dress survived Whitmore Estate." I laughed. Barely. She linked her arm through mine. "Come on, we're inside." I looked toward the building. Yesterday I had stood at those doors wondering whether I was welcome. Today I knew something far more important. Being welcomed by other people and knowing your own worth are not the same thing. I walked toward Whitmore Estate beside Judith. Behind us, Madeline was laughing with Nathan. Ahead of us waited a celebration. And for the first time in weeks, nobody was asking me to become someone else before I entered the room. I went inside exactly as I was. I considered the question. No. Her face fell. I squeezed her hand. "But I think we can be." She nodded. "I'll take that. You hurt me deeply." "I know. And I'm probably going to remember it sometimes when neither of us wants me to." "I understand. But I don't want to punish you forever." Madeline began crying. I touched her cheek. "People make terrible choices when they're afraid. That doesn't excuse it." "No." I smiled sadly. "But understanding something isn't the same as excusing it." She leaned into me. I wrapped my arms around her. For the first time since the wedding planning began, I held my daughter without feeling as though one of us was pretending. "I miss Dad," she whispered. "So do I. He would be furious with me." "Oh, absolutely." She laughed against my shoulder. "Would he forgive me?" I pulled back. "Eventually. How long depends. How much you cried." She laughed again. Then I reached into my purse. Inside was the place card from my table. I handed it to her. She looked confused. "Why are you giving me this? Keep it." Her smile disappeared. "Mom, not as punishment." I closed her fingers around it, as a reminder. She looked at the card. "Wilma Langford. A guest list tells you who is invited to an event," I said. "It does not tell you who matters in your life." Madeline pressed the card against her palm. "I'll keep it." "Good." We returned to the ballroom. Later that evening, Judith found me near the old west hallway. "I have something for you." She handed me an envelope. "What's this? Open it at home." "I don't like mysterious envelopes. You'll survive." I opened it anyway. Inside was a photograph. Two young women stood in front of Whitmore Estate. The brick behind us was faded. The lawn was terrible. Judith was holding a clipboard. I was holding a cup of coffee. Robert stood in the background beside his old work truck. I stared at the picture. I thought this was lost. I found it years ago. My eyes filled. On the back, Judith had written, "Before anyone thought this place was beautiful." I looked at her. "Thank you." "No." She smiled. "Thank you." Near the end of the reception, Madeline and Nathan began their final dance. I stood at the edge of the ballroom watching them. Madeline looked happy. Not perfect. Happy. There is a difference. I thought about the journey that had brought us there. The expensive dress. The seating chart. The rehearsal dinner. My crossed-out name. Judith recognizing me. Madeline's confession. My decision to return. None of it had unfolded the way I would have chosen. But perhaps healing rarely arrives through the door we expect. Sometimes it begins when someone finally admits what they did. Sometimes it begins when the person who was hurt refuses to disappear. And sometimes it begins when a mother learns that loving her child does not require abandoning herself. As the music ended, Madeline looked across the ballroom and found me. She smiled. I smiled back. My name had been removed from a guest list, but I had not been erased, and I never would be.